June 6, 1944, 0015 hours. Strong Point WN62, Omaha Beach. Gefreiter Heinrich Sevo carefully cleaned the barrel of his MG-42 machine gun in the concrete bunker overlooking the channel. In his pocket, he carried a letter from his girlfriend in Metzingen, promising to wait for him until the war's victorious end. "The invasion will be their grave. We will throw them back into the sea within hours." He had written these words to her just 3 days earlier, after Feldmarschall Erwin Rommel himself had inspected their positions. The Desert Fox had looked through Sevo's gun aperture, studied the overlapping fields of fire, and nodded with satisfaction. "When they come," Rommel had said, "this beach will be their cemetery." Through the embracer, Sevo could see nothing but peaceful darkness over the channel. The night was calm, almost serene. In 12 hours, this same young man would be found weeping uncontrollably in his bunker, surrounded by 13,500 empty shell casings, his gun barrel warped from heat, watching an invasion force so vast that his mind would simply refuse to process what his eyes were seeing. Though Sevo would later claim to have inflicted 1,000 to 2,000 casualties, historians consider this impossible given that total American casualties at Omaha Beach from all causes were approximately 2,400. The mathematics of German defeat were about to be written not in strategic assessments or intelligence reports, but in the shocked testimonies of soldiers who would witness the largest amphibious invasion in human history from the wrong side of the gun sight. The Atlantic Wall stretched 2,400 meters from Norway to the Spanish border, what German propaganda called the most formidable defensive line in military history. Along the Normandy coast, 58 divisions of varying quality manned positions that had consumed 17 million cubic meters of concrete and 1.2 million tons of steel. Hitler himself had declared it impregnable. The defensive preparations at Omaha Beach alone seemed to justify such confidence. The U.S. Army Center of Military History records that the Germans had constructed 8 concrete bunkers, 35 pillboxes, 4 artillery positions, 18 anti-tank gun positions, 45 rocket launcher sites, 85 machine gun nests, and 6 mortar pits. The beach itself had been turned into a killing field. 3,700 obstacles had been planted in the tidal zone, including Belgian dates, Czech hedgehogs, and wooden stakes, many topped with teller mines. Behind the beaches, 6.5 million mines had been laid, though Rommel had wanted 60 million. Colonel Ernst Goeth, commanding the 916th Grenadier Regiment near Bayeux, had calculated the defensive firepower in his sector. His 4 batteries could theoretically deliver 120 rounds per minute into the beach sectors. Combined with other batteries, the Germans could concentrate massive firepower on any landing attempt. These calculations, however, assumed unlimited ammunition, an assumption that would prove fatally flawed. June 5th had brought weather that Luftwaffe meteorologist Walter Stuba in Paris had declared impossible for invasion. Wind speeds reached 20 to 25 knots, waves climbed to 6 feet, and low clouds hung at 500 feet. Stuba, using data from U-boat and weather stations, had assured the High Command that conditions would remain poor for at least 2 weeks. Based on this forecast, many senior officers had left their posts. Rommel himself had departed for Germany on June 5th to celebrate his wife's birthday, carrying a pair of gray suede shoes he had purchased in Paris. General Friedrich Dollmann, commanding the 7th Army, had ordered division commanders to attend war games at Rennes. Even the naval patrols that normally swept the Channel had been cancelled due to rough seas. This meteorological confidence would prove to be the first German miscalculation. Unknown to Stuba, the Allies possessed weather stations in Greenland and weather flights over the Atlantic that detected a brief break in the storm, a 36-hour window that Group Captain James Stagg had identified and Eisenhower had seized. At 23:15 hours on June 5th, radar stations along the Norman coast began detecting unusual activity. Freya and Würzburg radar sets picked up massive aerial formations approaching from the north. The operators, however, had seen this before. Allied deception raids designed to keep German forces on alert. By 0030 hours on June 6th, reports began flooding in that challenged all assumptions. Fallschirmjäger, paratroopers, were landing across Normandy. But the reports made no sense. Some units reported paratroopers to the east, others to the west. Some claimed they were British, others American. Dummy paratroopers with firecrackers attached, part of Operations Titanic and Rupert, added to the confusion. Major Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment of the 21st Panzer Division, was one of the first to grasp the situation's gravity. Awakened by reports of paratroopers landing near his positions, he immediately requested permission to attack. The response from division headquarters, "Do not move until the situation clarifies." Von Luck would later write in his memoir, Panzer Commander, "I knew at that moment we were lost." The paratroopers were clearly marking flanks for a landing. Every minute we waited gave them time to consolidate, yet we sat paralyzed by our own command structure. Attempts to bring forward reserve stocks failed. Every road was under constant Allied fighter-bomber attack. The contrast with Allied firepower was stark. German observers noted that American destroyers would fire hundreds of shells at single targets, while German artillery was rationed to 4 shells per gun per day by the afternoon of D-Day. The German Armor Reserve, the force that RML had insisted must defeat any invasion on the beaches, remained paralyzed through the critical morning hours. The 21st Panzer Division, the only armored unit close to the beaches, did not receive orders to attack until 10 o'clock hours, 4 hours after the landings began. When the 21st Panzer finally attacked at 16:20 hours, they advanced between British airborne landing zones toward the coast. According to divisional records, they reached the shore between Lyon-sur-Mer and Luc-sur-Mer around 1900 hours, the only German armored unit to reach the coast on D-Day. However, at 2100 hours, they witnessed the arrival of Operation Millard, 250 gliders bringing reinforcements to the British 6th Airborne Division. Interpreting this massive air armada as a threat to their flanks, they withdrew. The division lost 54 tanks and armored vehicles on D-Day, approximately 25% of their strength, in a single day. The counterattack also encountered specialized Allied armor they had never seen before. Hobart's Funnies, modified tanks with flails for mine clearing, flamethrowers, and bridging equipment, seemed to belong to a different era of warfare entirely. Throughout D-Day, German units faced a threat they had never encountered at this scale: massive airborne forces operating behind their lines. The 6th Airborne Division, British, and the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, American, created chaos that multiplied their actual strength. Oberst Friedrich von der Leiter, Germany's most experienced paratrooper commander serving with the 6th Fallschirm Regiment, was in Normandy during the invasion. His professional assessment, recorded in post-war interviews, was damning. The Allied airborne operation was everything ours had never been: massive, coordinated, and supplied. We dropped battalions, they dropped divisions. We were supplied by single aircraft, they had endless streams of gliders and transport planes. The psychological impact of paratroopers appearing everywhere paralyzed German responses. Units refused to move, fearing ambush. Others fired at shadows, sometimes at their own men. The confusion multiplied German problems exponentially. As D-Day progressed, German command and control disintegrated. Allied aircraft systematically destroyed communication lines. French resistance, activated by coded BBC messages, cut telephone cables and destroyed relay stations. Radio communications were jammed by Allied electronic warfare units. General Lieutenant Max Pemel, Chief of Staff of the 7th Army, attempted to coordinate the defense from his headquarters at Le Mans. His war diary records increasing frustration as contact with forward units disappeared. By noon, entire divisions had vanished from the communication network. Individual unit commanders made decisions in isolation without knowledge of the larger picture. As darkness fell on June 6th, surviving German defenders took stock of their situation. The impregnable Atlantic Wall had been breached in multiple places. The Luftwaffe had essentially ceased to exist over Normandy. The Kriegsmarine had managed to sink one destroyer, USS Corrie, while losing 15 E-boats and numerous smaller craft. General Obersttruppenführer Wilhelm Richert, commanding the 716th Division, which had borne the brunt of the British assault, reported to 7th Army headquarters. Division combat strength, 35%. All coastal strongpoints lost. Artillery, 90% destroyed. Enemy advancing inland. The statistics told a story of complete tactical failure despite individual acts of heroism. In a single day, the German forces had suffered casualties equivalent to those of a major battle, while the Allies continued landing fresh troops as if D-Day was merely the beginning, not the climax. Throughout the night of June 6th to 7th, German units attempted to regroup and counterattack. These efforts revealed the full extent of Allied superiority. Every German movement was detected by radar, illuminated by flares, and destroyed by artillery or naval gunfire. Hans von Luck's Panzer Grenadiers, finally released to counterattack, advanced towards Sword Beach in darkness. According to his memoir, they were immediately illuminated by parachute flares and subjected to devastating fire from destroyers offshore. It was like daylight. Every vehicle, every soldier was visible. The shells came from the sea with perfect accuracy. We lost half our strength without seeing a single enemy soldier. Meanwhile, Allied reinforcements continued landing. The artificial Mulberry harbors were already being assembled. Supply ships anchored in organized rows. The invasion wasn't just succeeding, it was transforming into a permanent presence. As German reinforcements attempted to reach Normandy, they encountered complete interdiction of movement. Every road, railway, and bridge was under constant attack. According to Wehrmacht transportation records, units that should have reached the front in one day took up to 2 weeks. The 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, stationed near Toulouse, took 17 days to reach Normandy, a journey that should have taken 3 days. They arrived having lost 30% of their vehicles to air attack without firing a single ground force. The psychological impact was devastating. If they couldn't even reach the battlefield intact, how could they hope to influence it? Meanwhile, Allied logistics operated with stunning efficiency. LSTs, landing ship tank, discharged entire armored regiments in hours. Within days of D-Day, the Allies were landing 15,000 tons of supplies daily, more than the entire German army in Normandy consumed in a week. By June 12th, German forces in Normandy were approaching psychological collapse. They had lost 26,000 men, killed, wounded, or missing, roughly equivalent to 2 full divisions. Replacements were minimal. Meanwhile, Allied strength grew hourly. Carentan fell on June 12th, linking Utah and Omaha beaches. The German paratroopers of the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, elite troops who had never previously retreated, withdrew in disorder. Their commander, Friedrich von der Leiter, reported to higher headquarters, "My regiment no longer exists as a combat unit. The survivors are psychologically broken." On June 13th, SS Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann achieved one of the few German tactical victories in Normandy. According to British military records, he destroyed 13 to 14 tanks, 2 anti-tank guns, and 13 to 15 personnel carriers in the Battle of Villers-Bocage within 15 minutes. German propaganda seized on this victory as proof that German arms could still prevail. But even this victory revealed the futility of the German position. Whitman's Tiger tank, disabled in the battle, was replaced by the Germans with difficulty. The British losses were replaced within hours. The tactical brilliance of individual German soldiers could not overcome industrial mathematics. Whitman himself, with 138 confirmed tank kills across all fronts, was eliminated by an enemy that could afford to trade 10 tanks for 1 Tiger. The fall of Cherbourg on June 26 provided another psychological blow. This major port, fortified over 4 years and garrisoned by 21,000 men, was supposed to hold for months. It fell in 5 days of serious fighting. General Lieutenant Karl Wilhelm von Schlieben, commanding the garrison, had proclaimed he would defend Cherbourg to the last bullet. Instead, he surrendered on June 26. In his post-war interrogation, he explained that resistance became meaningless against unlimited enemy resources, a theme that would echo throughout German accounts of Normandy. Operation Cobra, beginning July 25, delivered the knockout punch to German forces in Normandy. According to official U.S. Army Air Force records, the preparatory bombardment involved 1,053 heavy bombers, 380 medium bombers, and 550 fighter bombers, dropping over 4,100 tons of bombs in a concentrated area just 7,000 yards wide and 2,500 yards deep. General Lieutenant Fritz Bayerlein, commanding Panzer Division, reported to Army Group B, "My division is annihilated. The psychological effect on the survivors is indescribable. They are no longer soldiers, but broken men." The bombing was so intense that Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, the highest-ranking American officer killed in the European theater, who was observing from what was thought to be a safe distance, if American generals weren't safe from their own firepower, what chance did German soldiers have? The Falaise Pocket, August 12th to 21st, became the graveyard of German forces in Normandy. According to Allied intelligence reports, confirmed by post-war German records, approximately 10,000 Germans died in the pocket and 50,000 were captured. Over 2,500 tanks and armored vehicles were destroyed, along with 2,500 other vehicles. German soldiers attempting to escape described scenes. The folder slammed onto the mahogany desk with such force that coffee splashed from Admiral Wilhelm Canaris's porcelain cup, staining intelligence reports that would have meant execution if discovered by the Gestapo. Impossible! The Americans are feeding us propaganda through turned agents. Through the tall windows of Abwehr headquarters, Canaris could see the Landwehr Canal, where Rosa Luxemburg's body had been dumped 24 years earlier. Now, as chief of German military intelligence, he held in his trembling hands a report that challenged not just Nazi propaganda, but the entire mathematical foundation of German victory. According to intercepted communications and reports from agents still operating in Mexico City, the Ford Motor Company's Willow Run plant was producing one 4-engine B-24 Liberator bomber every hour. The B-24 Liberator, 1.5 million individual parts, 450,000 rivets, 30,000 separate components assembled into an 18-ton aircraft, rolling off an assembly line faster than Germany could produce a simple Kubowagen military vehicle. Major Friedrich Wilhelm Heinz, standing at attention before Canaris's desk, had triple-cheed the intelligence. The numbers remained the same. What neither man knew was that this moment would trigger the most devastating intelligence failure in modern warfare: the systematic inability of German intelligence to comprehend, believe, or effectively communicate the true scale of American industrial capacity to the Nazi leadership, dooming the Third Reich through a fatal miscalculation of mathematical inevitability. The collapse of German intelligence regarding American production had begun 2 years earlier. In 1941, Luftwaffe General Karl Kohler had presented Hermann Göring with reports from military attaché General Friedrich von Bottcher in Washington, stating that American aircraft production was approaching 2,000 planes per month. Göring had laughed, literally laughed, declaring Americans could only build refrigerators and razor blades, not military aircraft. The Americans are bluffing, Göring had told Hitler at the Wolf-Schanze in December 1941, 4 days after Pearl Harbor. Their democracy makes them weak, their mongrel population makes them inefficient, their Jews make them corrupt, they cannot possibly produce what they claim. By March 1943, German intelligence networks across the Americas were reporting something that defied every assumption of Nazi racial theory and economic understanding. The reports came from different sources: Mexican industrialists sympathetic to Germany, Spanish diplomats, Swedish businessmen traveling through Detroit, even intercepted letters from American workers to relatives in neutral countries. They all said the same impossible thing. Ford's Willow Run plant alone was producing more heavy bombers than all of Germany's aircraft factories combined. Oberstleutnant Nicholas Ritter, head of Abwehr's air intelligence section upon Furl Luft, had spent 3 weeks analyzing the data. A former Lufthansa pilot who had lived in America for 10 years before the war, Ritter understood American industrial capacity better than most German officers. His apartment in Manhattan during the 1920s had overlooked the construction of the Chrysler Building. He had watched Americans erect the world's tallest building in less than 2 years. Herr Admiral Ritter reported to Canaris, "If these numbers are correct, and I believe they are, then Germany has already lost the war. It is now only a question of mathematics and time." The intelligence came through circuitous routes, each more dangerous than the last. Georg Nicholas, running the Abwehr's primary network in Mexico City, had cultivated sources among American businessmen who traveled freely between Detroit and Mexico's oil fields. These men spoke casually of miracles they witnessed, unaware their dinner conversations were being transcribed by German agents. On February 3, 1943, American oil executive Harold Morrison had attended a reception at the German-Mexican Commerce Association in Mexico City. After several tequilas, Morrison began describing his recent tour of the Willow Run facility, arranged by Ford to showcase to potential investors the company's capability to fulfill government contracts. "Gentlemen," Morrison had said, unaware that Wolfgang Blau, a German agent posing as an Argentine leather merchant, was memorizing every word. "What I saw defies description. The assembly line is over a mile long. The building is so vast that clouds form inside it, and it sometimes rains within the factory. They have 42,000 workers, including thousands of women, Negro women, building the most complex machine ever created." Morrison had pulled out a pencil and began sketching on a napkin. "The bomber has 2 bomb bays, each holding 4,000 pounds of ordnance, 4 engines, each producing 1,200 horsepower. They produce them in sections, sub-assemblies, Ford calls them, that converge like rivers flowing into the sea. Wing sections arrive from one direction, fuselages from another, tail assemblies from a third. They meet at precise points along the line." Blaum had asked, trying to sound casually interested, "But surely such complexity means frequent breakdowns, production delays." Morrison had laughed. "That's what Consolidated Aircraft thought. They mocked Ford, said you can't build planes like cars. But Ford broke the bomber down into 60,000 separate operations. Each worker performs the same task over and over. A woman who yesterday was making breakfast for her children now installs hydraulic lines in the tail section. They train them in days, not months." Perhaps the most detailed intelligence came through Francisco Franco's Spain. Colonel José Ungría, Spanish military attaché in Washington, maintained close relationships with American aircraft manufacturers while secretly providing intelligence to Germany in exchange for tungsten shipments, crucial to Spanish industry. In March 1943, Ungría attended a reception at the Argentine embassy where he met Charles Sorensen, Ford's production chief and the architect of Willow Run. Sorensen, believing he was speaking to a representative of a neutral nation that might purchase aircraft after the war, spoke freely about the plant's capabilities. "Colonel," Sorensen had said, unaware that every word would be in Berlin within 2 weeks, When I first visited Consolidated San Diego plant in 1940, they were building B-24s outdoors in the sunshine, each one different from the last, taking 180,000 man-hours per aircraft. I knew we could do better. Ungria had pressed for details, claiming professional interest as a military engineer. Sorensen, proud of his achievement, obliged. I spent one night in my hotel room in San Diego sketching out the entire production flow. We would build bombers like we build cars, not by having workers swarm over a stationary aircraft, but by moving the aircraft past stationary workers. Each worker would perform specific tasks repeatedly, achieving perfection through repetition. The Spaniard had asked about the workforce challenges of such complexity. "We built an apprentice school that trains 8,000 workers weekly," Sorensen replied. "Women comprise 40% of our workforce. They're actually better at detailed work, smaller hands for tight spaces, more patience for repetitive tasks. We have Negro workers operating sophisticated machinery. We have boys of 16 managing supply logistics. Democracy, Colonel, means utilizing all available human resources." Through Swedish, Argentine, Japanese, and Turkish channels, German intelligence received consistent reports confirming Willow Run's production rate. The numbers were staggering. Willow Run alone was producing 650 B-24s monthly at peak, with the entire American B-24 production exceeding 1,400 monthly. Desperate for ground truth, Canaris authorized Operation Pastorius, the insertion of saboteurs into the United States via submarine. George John Dash, leader of one of the two four-man teams, had lived in America for 20 years before returning to Germany in 1939. His secret orders from Canaris were to gather intelligence on aircraft production before conducting any sabotage. In the early morning hours of June 13, 1942, Dash's team landed at Amagansett, Maud Island, having come ashore from U-202 just after midnight. Within days, tormented by the implications of his mission and what he already knew about American capacity, Dash surrendered to the FBI. During his interrogation, Dash revealed something that stunned his American captives. "Canaris himself told me that Berlin doesn't believe your production figures. They think Willow Run is propaganda. He wanted photographs, employee counts, shipping records, proof that would force Göring to accept reality." FBI Special Agent Charles Landman asked incredulously, "They don't believe we're producing a bomber an hour?" Dash laughed bitterly. "Agent Landman, I lived here. I've seen your automobile factories. I tried to tell them that if Ford could produce a car every minute before the war, they could certainly produce a bomber every hour during it. They accused me of being defeatist." On April 20, 1943, Hitler's 54th birthday, Canaris personally presented the intelligence to Göring at Karenhall, the Reichsmarshal's ostentatious hunting estate north of Berlin. The meeting would become legendary among German intelligence officers for Göring's complete rejection of reality. Canaris had brought photographs, intercepted documents, reports from dozens of sources. They spread them across Göring's massive oak table like a dealer showing cards that would lose the game. They achieved this rate consistently since January. Göring, weighing over 280 pounds by this point in the war, picked up one of the photographs showing the assembly line stretching into the distance. "Canaris," Göring said with contempt, "do you take me for a fool? These are obviously wooden mock-ups, props for propaganda. The Americans want us to believe they can build aircraft like sausages. This Willow Run plant probably produces 50 bombers monthly at most." Canaris pulled out another document, an intercepted manifest from the Pennsylvania Railroad showing aluminum shipments. "Herr Reichsmarschall, they're consuming 16 million pounds of aluminum monthly at this one plant." Göring laughed harshly. "Then where do they get this aluminum? From their Negro workers? From their women riveters? Canaris, you've been deceived by American propaganda." A week later, Canaris was summoned to the Wolfschanze to brief Hitler personally. The meeting included Generals Jodl and Kittel and Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels. Hitler, studying maps of the Eastern Front, where the Wehrmacht was preparing for Operation Citadel, the Battle of Kursk, listened impatiently as Canaris presented the intelligence. "Mein Führer," Canaris said, knowing he was risking his life. "If the Americans are producing 1,400 B-24s monthly, plus equal numbers of B-17, plus their fighter aircraft, plus British production, the aerial bombardment of the Reich will soon exceed our defensive capabilities." Hitler's response was characteristic. "Admiral, the Americans are capable of mass production of simple goods, automobiles, refrigerators, but a bomber is not a car. It requires precision, skill, dedication. When it took us 6 years to prepare for war, they claimed to have achieved this in 16 months. It's impossible." General Jodl studied Canaris's figures and made a calculation. "Even if we accept 1/4 of these figures as accurate—" "The figures are false," Hitler interrupted. "The Americans entered the war in December 1941. Building this miraculous factory and achieving this production in such time is impossible." Unknown to Nazi leadership, Canaris had obtained film footage of Willow Run in operation through American intelligence contacts in Switzerland. The film, smuggled via Spanish diplomatic pouches, showed 5 minutes of the assembly line in full operation. Canaris and his deputy Hans Oster watched the film in a locked room in Abwehr headquarters. The camera traveled along the entire mile-long assembly line. B-24s in every stage of construction moved past at steady pace. Workers, men, women, black, white, performed tasks with mechanical precision. A clack visible in several shots confirmed the timing. "My God," Oster whispered, "it's true." Canaris lit the film with his cigarette lighter, watching it burn. "We cannot show this to them. They would accuse us of creating fake footage or being traitors." In November 1943, German intelligence obtained aerial photographs of Willow Run taken by a Spanish diplomat. Photoanalysts spent weeks studying the images. Their conclusions: parking lots contained approximately 12,000 cars, indicating 3-shift operations. Completed B-24s visible at adjacent airfield, 47 aircraft ready for delivery. Assembly line visible through skylights, aircraft spaced exactly as reported. Rail sidings showed dozens of freight cars delivering materials. Headman Werner wrote, "Photographic evidence confirms human intelligence. Production rate appears accurate. Recommend immediate strategic reassessment." Göring, shown the photographs, dismissed them as clever American photographic manipulation, probably using scale models. Dr. Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister and the only Nazi leader with genuine understanding of industrial production, secretly obtained the American intelligence. His diary entry for May 15, 1943, discovered after the war, reveals his despair. "If the Willow Run figures are even half accurate, we face not defeat but annihilation. They produce more aircraft in a month than we do in a year. But I cannot speak this truth. To do so would be my death warrant." Dr. Otto Ohlendorf, head of SD in Inland and a trained economist, analyzed American economic data. His report to Himmler in December 1943 was stark. The Ford Motor Company's peacetime production in 1941 was 1.1 million vehicles. They have converted this capacity to bomber production at current rates. By June 1944, the Americans will have produced enough B-24s alone to drop our entire 1940 London bombing tonnage every single day. On Christmas Eve 1943, Canaris received intelligence showing American production projections for 1944. B-24 Liberators, 18,000. B-17 Flying Fortresses, 12,000. B-29 Superfortresses, 1,000. Fighter aircraft, 40,000. Total, 86,000 aircraft. Hitler's response when presented these figures: "The Americans claim they will produce more aircraft in 1944 than all nations have produced in all of history. It's absurd." By February 1944, Canaris was removed from his position, suspected of defeatism and treason. His replacement, Walter Schellenberg, was a Nazi loyalist who wouldn't dare contradict Hitler or Göring. But reality couldn't be ignored forever. On February 20th, 1944, Big Week, the American 8th Air Force launched Operation Argument, sending over 1,000 heavy bombers against German aircraft factories. In 6 days, they dropped more bomb tonnage than the Luftwaffe had dropped on Britain during the entire Blitz. Luftwaffe fighter pilot Adolf Galland told Göring, "Herr Reichsmarschall, I've counted over 800 bombers in a single formation. These planes are real, and they're dropping real bombs." On Christmas Eve, 1943, Canaris received intelligence showing American production projections for 1944. B-24 Liberators, 18,000. B-17 Flying Fortresses, 12,000. B-29 Superfortresses, 1,000. Fighter aircraft, 40,000. Total, 86,000 aircraft. Hitler's response when presented these figures: the Americans claim they will produce more aircraft in 1944 than all nations have produced in all of history. It's absurd. By February 1944, Canaris was removed from his position, suspected of defeatism and treason. His replacement, Walter Schellenberg, was a Nazi loyalist who wouldn't dare contradict Hitler or Göring. But reality couldn't be ignored forever. On February 20th, 1944, Big Week, the American 8th Air Force launched Operation Argument, sending over 1,000 heavy bombers against German aircraft factories. In 6 days, they dropped more bomb tonnage than the Luftwaffe had dropped on Britain during the entire Blitz. Luftwaffe fighter pilot Adolf Galland told Göring, "Herr Reichsmarschall, I've counted over 800 bombers in a single formation. These planes are real, and they're dropping real bombs." On Christmas Eve, 1943, Canaris received intelligence showing American production projections for 1944. B-24 Liberators, 18,000. B-17 Flying Fortresses, 12,000. B-29 Superfortresses, 1,000. Fighter aircraft, 40,000. Total, 86,000 aircraft. Hitler's response when presented these figures: the Americans claim they will produce more aircraft in 1944 than all nations have produced in all of history. It's absurd. By February 1944, Canaris was removed from his position, suspected of defeatism and treason. His replacement, Walter Schellenberg, was a Nazi loyalist who wouldn't dare contradict Hitler or Göring. But reality couldn't be ignored forever. On February 20th, 1944, Big Week, the American 8th Air Force launched Operation Argument, sending over 1,000 heavy bombers against German aircraft factories. In 6 days, they dropped more bomb tonnage than the Luftwaffe had dropped on Britain during the entire Blitz. Luftwaffe fighter pilot Adolf Galland told Göring, "Herr Reichsmarschall, I've counted over 800 bombers in a single formation. These planes are real, and they're dropping real bombs." On Christmas Eve, 1943, Canaris received intelligence showing American production projections for 1944. B-24 Liberators, 18,000. B-17 Flying Fortresses, 12,000. B-29 Superfortresses, 1,000. Fighter aircraft, 40,000. Total, 86,000 aircraft. Hitler's response when presented these figures: the Americans claim they will produce more aircraft in 1944 than all nations have produced in all of history. It's absurd. By February 1944, Canaris was removed from his position, suspected of defeatism and treason. His replacement, Walter Schellenberg, was a Nazi loyalist who wouldn't dare contradict Hitler or Göring. But reality couldn't be ignored forever. On February 20th, 1944, Big Week, the American 8th Air Force launched Operation Argument, sending over 1,000 heavy bombers against German aircraft factories. In 6 days, they dropped more bomb tonnage than the Luftwaffe had dropped on Britain during the entire Blitz. Luftwaffe fighter pilot Adolf Galland told Göring, "Herr Reichsmarschall, I've counted over 800 bombers in a single formation. These planes are real, and they're dropping real bombs." On Christmas Eve, 1943, Canaris received intelligence showing American production projections for 1944.